So this will be a fairly short presentation, but I'll mainly focus on what's new in recent releases of the DITA Open Toolkit, and we'll spend a good bit of time talking about the 1.3 support, and then some about the HTML5 transformation and some enhancements to the PDF transformation. So just very quickly, I'm involved with the DITA Technical Committee at OASIS and have been a DITA Open Toolkit contributor for 6 years now. I had to ask Robert over the weekend, how long have I been involved? And I just thought it might be useful before we get started to get a sense of who everybody in the audience is. So I kind of divvied things up into 4 categories: authors, information architects, practitioners, and developers. And I imagine we'll have a good bit of overlap. But just hands up for people who consider themselves primarily DITA authors. Okay, DITA information architects, bigger. DITA practitioners, okay, and finally developers. Ooh, nice. So just a quick introduction, and I'm not going to go into depth here. If you're interested, you can pull up the slides or the video from last year's presentation. But the Toolkit project was started in 2004. IBM donated DITA to OASIS, but OASIS did not want the scripts and other functionality that evolved into the DITA Open Toolkit. It currently holds monthly contributor meetings. They're chaired by Robert Anderson, and Robert is the person you should contact if you'd like to get an invitation to those monthly calls. And the code and the packages are at GitHub. Got some names and faces to people that are rather frequent contributors to the toolkit, and many, almost all, are here today. So just to jump in, 2 major releases since we were here last, 2.1 and 2.2 announced today. And a lot of what went into DITA-OT 2.1 are under the cover changes that made some of the support for new 1.3 functionality possible, or made the toolkit more efficient, more responsive, and Jarno will be talking about that later. For 2.2, a lot of what's rolled in there is strong support for DITA 1.3, the new HTML5 transformation, some enhancements to the PDF transform, and some enhancements to the DITA command. And I may be leaving out some of people's favorite features. It was a little daunting to look at the release notes and try to pull out what were the most important ones to focus on. But before we go any further, before we talk about 1.3 support, I think a question many will have is, when will 1.3 be released? And we've got a date. And I think unless there's any slippage on the OASIS admin side, it will be December 15th next month. We're pretty excited about that. So support for DITA 1.3 began rolling into DITA-OT 2.0. And so those are the smaller items that we've got up there. Support for same topic fragment identifiers, the cascade attribute, and so forth. And I thought that perhaps everybody wouldn't actually be knowledgeable about what these different features are, so we've got a little bit of background to explain what each of these now do. So the same topic fragment identifier simply provides some simplified syntax for addressing an element in the same topic. And this was part of the DITA 2.0 support. The cascade attribute gives information architects the ability to have more control over filtering attributes as they cascade through a map. And the example here is in 1.2, if you have values for a filtering for a select attribute on the root element of a map, those would cascade down into the map, into that topic cluster for Linux. Even though it really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to have values for Windows and map on a topic cluster that's explicitly for Linux. So with 1.3, you're going to have more control over this. We've added a new attribute called Cascade. It's got two values, merge and no merge. And it will let you control whether you want the values to cascade down from the map. In this situation, applying a value of cascade equals no merge will enable to turn off that cascading from a higher point in the map. I also just want to say I'd be really happy to take questions at any time. So if you've got a question, jump in rather than waiting for the end. Also, some support for expanded syntax for filtering attributes. And here's where the filtering attributes now accept the same sort of grouped values as generalized attribute values for props and base. And this will really let people avoid specializing attributes and let architects create subcategories of existing filtering attributes. So just some quick examples here, and you can see how in 1.3 you've got a little more fine-grained control here, and can actually filter on the attribute subcategory. This was a 1.3 feature that Robert Anderson championed, so I will defer any detailed questions about this to Robert. New additions to the highlighting domain, line through, overline. Two new domains, markup domain and XML mention domain. And we use the XML mention domain heavily in the DITA 1.3 specification. A new element called div, which is primarily helpful as a specialization base, but also a way that authors can group content for reuse. And this was a contribution or championed, this was championed by Elliot Kimber. And really probably the big ticket items that you're all waiting for, scoped keys. In 1.2, if you had a key, it really had one effective binding for your entire publication map. And with scoped keys and DITA 1.3, you're going to have a mechanism in which you can have a single key resolve differently in different branches of the map. And this will make it possible to combine, to aggregate material from different companies or teams that might use the same keys without having key collisions. Standard use case here, of course, are the need to do omnibus publications or multi-product publications, or perhaps simply having better templated topics that use key refs for graphics or variable text. And just some very quick examples of the potential markup in which applying the key scope attribute to a topic ref or a topic ref specialization then lets you have keys resolved differently within that particular scope. The second big 1.3 feature that is supported in DITA-OT 2.2 is branch filtering. And this also came from Robert Anderson at IBM. And this again is just going to make DITA reuse more robust. In 1.2, you're really restricted to having one set of filtering conditions per root map, per publication. And with branch filtering, you've got the ability to apply multiple sets of conditional processing profiles to a particular map. You can apply to the root map, to different branches within the map. And this really just makes reuse, again, much more powerful. I certainly had clients that really needed this, or really need this. They produce medical information, and they had topics that were generated and written for both an audience of parents of a patient or adults as a patient. And they wanted to be able to build those data topics at the same time in one publication without branch filtering. That was not a possibility. Another thing with DITA-OT 2.2 is the RNG files become the default grammar files used for processing. And RelaxNG, championed by Elliot Kimber, was another large addition to 1.3, or is a large addition to 1.3. And it will make specialization and creating document type shells much easier than working natively with the DDDs or XSDs. Any questions about the 1.3 features before I jump into some of the other new things that come with DITA-OT 2.2? Great. So maybe many of you have seen that some of the earlier toolkit releases had some HTML5 functionality, but now with this version of the DITA Open Toolkit, there's a separate plugin for HTML5. It has the default CSS has now been refactored, and there's also a new parameter, navtalk, that lets you generate a talk in the nav element of each HTML page. And this has various values that let you control just how much content you want in that talk. Also, some changes, some small, some bigger, to the PDF transformation. Support for 15 new languages, thanks to Robert. Some new extension points. A very minor detail, but some of you will appreciate that the rather offensive pointing finger icon is no longer in there by default. And the parameter that previously had only let people turn on the names of artwork files in HTML output is now supported in PDF also. Guys, did I miss anything big that was an enhancement to PDF here? I'm seeing shaking heads, so. And finally, if you remember the DITA command, which also came in 2.0, has been enhanced, and you now have the ability to install multiple plugins at a time using the DITA command rather than doing them one by one. So that's really what I had put together to give us a starting point for this new release and for the 1.3 functionality. Any questions? Slides will be available, and I do have some links for resources, both to the DITA-OT release notes and to information about 1.3. Thank you.